I mostly read public domain books here on Glenn Reads Books to You, and they were written a long time ago, so they're usually racist, or sexist, or bigoted, but in there somewhere is a story, and that's why those stories are famous. Other times, I read works from independent authors, and they're delightfully not racist, but they might have adult language or adult situations, like, making sex. So that's your warning, but I'm sure you're grown up enough to handle it. Don't write to me complaining. I never know what this is. Is it Labor Day? Memorial Day? Is it COVID? Oh, God damn it. All right. Yeah, take a seat, you little idiot. I was just trying to remember. It's a holiday weekend. I never remember what it is. Labor Day or Memorial Day or something. Something we're celebrating, usually around dead people. I'm not exactly sure. I'm thinking it's Memorial Day. Either way, I'm getting together with my sister and my brother-in-law, and we're going to grill, which you do on both holidays. We've set up the white trash pool, which is now outside, and I tried really hard to level the ground, and somehow it still wound up really crooked and slanted. So now there's water over on one side where it's up on the lip, and on the other side is basically like a shallow end. I don't know. Why do I bother? I guess we just like to get drunk and swim around in warm water. Welcome to the Glenn Reads Books to You mansion. It's a fun little bit where I pretend to live in a mansion and not just recording in my basement. This is where I read the hottest public domain books and short stories. This week, we're going to continue to read Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson. Want to learn about the author? I hope so. Yeah, I took the time to steal this from Wikipedia. Robert Louis Balfour, horrible name, Stevenson, was born the 13th of November, 1850, and died the 3rd of December, 1894. He was a Scottish novelist, essayist, and poet, and travel writer. He is best known for works such as Treasure Island, The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Kidnapped, and A Child's Garden of Verses. Born and educated in Edinburgh, Stevenson suffered from serious bronchial trouble for much of his life, but continued to write prolifically and travel widely in defiance of his poor health. He settled in Samoa, where, alarmed at increasing European and American influence at the South Sea Islands, his writing turned from romance and adventure fiction toward a darker realism. He died of a stroke in his island home in 1894 at the age of 44. Yeah, I read one of the things was he suddenly turned to his wife and said, "Is half my face drooping?" And then he collapsed. That's terrible. Want to hear some fun facts that I stole from mentalfloss.com? Sure. It first appeared under a pseudonym. That's a weird title. It's a man. He's a person. The publisher of Young Folks, a weekly literary journal for boys, agreed to publish Treasure Island in what would eventually become in 18 weekly installments. Stevenson relished the opportunity, but published under the pseudonym Captain George North, which he never articulated why. Exactly, though, it was probably worried about sullying his family's good name if the story were poorly received. His wife, Fanny, also hated Treasure Island, thinking the work beneath her brilliant husband. Wow. Before it was published as a separate book, she wrote, "I'm glad poet Edmund William Grossi likes Treasure Island. I don't. I like the beginning, but after that, life seems to go out of it, and it becomes tedious." Wow. What a horrible piece of shit. Readers didn't like it to begin with. Apparently the story moved so slowly for the lads who subscribed to Young Folks. As one of the readers put it, they kept dragging on weeks and weeks of the preliminary matters connected to the end. They wanted to get to the sea. They wanted to see the treasure hunt. Bunch of dicks. Well, that's the clock saying for me to shut up. Let's go read the story. Well, there you go. Why don't you get yourself settled? I couldn't help but notice you looking out this library window onto my above-ground pool, 16 feet in circumference, slanted on one side so there's a shallow end and a really deep end. Yes, I know you want to get in there, but you can't. It's too cold. I just filled it up with water today. All right, well, Part 4, The Stockade. Narrative continued by the doctor, how the ship was abandoned. Now it's about 1:30 at 3 bells in the sea phrase that the 2 boats went to shore from the Hispaniola in all caps. The captain, the squire, and I were talking matters over in the cabin, and had there been a breath of wind, we should have fallen on the 6 mutineers who were left aboard with us, slipped our cable, and away to sea. But the wind was wanting, and to complete our helplessness, down came Hunter with the news that Jim Hawkins had slipped into a boat and was gone ashore with the rest. It never occurred to us to doubt Jim Hawkins, but we were alarmed for his safety. Why don't they think he's a mutineer at this part? With the men in temper, they were in. It seemed even a chance if we should see the lad again. We ran on deck. The pitch was bubbling in the seams. The nasty stench of the place turned me sick, if ever a man smelt fever and dysentery. It was that abominable anchorage. The 6 scoundrels were sitting grumbling under a sail in the forecastle. Ashore, we could see the gigs, made fast, and a man sitting in each, hard by where the river runs in. One of them was whistling Lily Bolero. Not looking that up, I guess it's just a very old song you can whistle. Waiting was a strain. It was decided that Hunter and I should go ashore with the jolly boat in quest for information. The gigs had leaned to their right, but Hunter and I pulled straight in the direction of the stockade, upon the chart. The 2 who were left guarding their boats seemed to bustle at our appearance. Lily Bolero stopped off, and I could see the pair discussing what they ought to do. Had they gone and told Silver, all might have turned out differently. But they had their orders, I suppose, and decided to sit quietly where they were and hark back to Lily Bolero. Now there was a slight bend in the coast. I steered so as to put it between us even before we landed, and had thus lost sight of the gigs. I jumped out and came as near as running as I durst, with a big silk handkerchief under my hat for coolness' sake, and a brace of pistols ready primed for safety. I had not gone 100 yards when I reached the stockade. This was how it was. Burp. A spring of clear water rose almost at the top of the knoll. Well, on the knoll, and enclosing the spring, they had clapped a stout log house fit to hold a score of people in a pinch, and loopholed for musketry on either side. All around this, they had cleared a wide space, and then the thing was completely by paling 6 feet high. Well, I don't know what that means. Without door or opening, don't know. Too strong to pull down without time and labor, and too open to shelter the besiegers. The people in the log house had them in every way. They stood quite in shelter and shot the others like partridges. All wanted to be a good watch and food, for short of a complete surprise, and they might have held the place against a regiment. What particularly took my fancy was the spring, for though we had a good enough place of it in the cabin in the Hispaniola, with plenty of arms and ammunition and things to eat, and excellent wines. There had been one thing overlooked. We had no water. And I was thinking this over when there came a ringing over the island and the cry of a man at the point of death. I was not new to violent death. I have served His Royal Highness and the Duke of Cumberland, and we got a wound myself in Fauntleroy, and I know my pulse went dot and carry one. I don't know what any of that just meant. Jim Hawkins is gone, was my first thought. Oh, good, we're back to the point. It is something to have an old soldier, but more still to have been a doctor. Oh, that he's an old soldier. Okay, all right. Why is everything confusing me? I don't know. Maybe it's the holiday. There is no time to dilly-dally in our work, and so now I made up my mind instantly, and with no time lost, returned to the shore and jumped on board the jolly boat. By good fortune, Hunter pulled a good oar. We made the water fly, and the boat was soon alongside, and I aboard the schooner. I found them all shaken, as was natural. The squire was sitting down, as wise as sheet. Thinking of the harm he had led us. A good soul! ! And one of the 6 forecastle hands was a little better. There's a man, said Captain Smollett, nodding toward him, new to this work. He came nigh hand fainting, Doctor, when he heard the cry. Another touch of the rudder, and that man would join us. Well, I told my plan to the captain, and between us settled on the details of its accomplishment. We put old Redruth in the galley between the cabin and the forecastle, with 3 or 4 loaded muskets and a mattress and a mattress for protection. Hunter brought the boat round under the stern port. Joyce and I set to work loading her with powder tins, muskets, bags of biscuits, kegs of pork, and a cask of cognac, and my invaluable medicine chest. In the meantime, the squire and the captain stayed on deck, and the latter hailed the coxswain, who's the principal man aboard. "Mr. Hands," he said, "here are two of us with a brace of pistols each. And if any one of you, 6, make a signal of any description, that man's dead." Oh, they were a good deal taken aback, and after a little consultation, one of all tumbled down the fore companion, thinking no doubt to take us on the rear. Oh, but when they saw Redruth waiting for them in the sparred galley, well, they went about the ship at once, and head popped out on the deck again. "Down, dog," cries the captain. And the head popped back up again, and we heard no more, for the time, of these 6 very faint-hearted seamen. By this time, tumbling things in as they came, we had the jolly boat loaded as much as we dared. Joyce and I got out through the stern port and made for shore as fast as oars could take us. The second trip fairly aroused the watchers along the shore. Lilyborough was dropped again, and just before we lost sight of them behind the little point, one of them whipped ashore and disappeared, and I had half a mind to change my plan to destroy the boats. But I fear that Silver and the others might be close at hand, and all might very well be lost by trying for too much. We had soon touched land in the same place as before and set to provision the blockhouse. All 3 made the first journey, heavily laden, and tossed our stores over the palisade. Then, leaving Joyce to guard them, 1 man to be sure, but with half a dozen muskets, Hunter and I returned to the jolly boat and loaded ourselves once more. So we proceeded without pausing to take a breath, till the whole cargo was bestowed. And when 2 servants took up their position in the blockhouse, and I, with all my power, scullied back to the Hispaniola. That we should have risked. A second boatload seems more daring than it really was. Oh, they had the advantage of numbers, of course, but we had the advantage of arms. Not one with the men ashore had a musket, and before they could get within range for pistol shooting, we flattered ourselves, and we could be able to give a good account of half a dozen at least. The squire was waiting for me at the stern window, all of his faintness gone from him. He caught the painter and made it fast, and we all fell to loading the boat for our very lives. Pork, powder, and biscuit was the cargo, with only a musket and a cutlass apiece for the squire and me and Redruth and the captain. The rest of the arms and the powder we dropped overboard in 2 fathoms and half the water, so that we could see the bright steel shining far below us in the sun, in the clean, sandy bottom. By this time, well, the tide was beginning to ebb, and the ship was swinging around to her anchor. Voices were heard faintly hallooing in the direction of the 2 gigs. Through this reassured us for Joyce and Hunter, who were well eastward, and it warned our party to be off. Redruth retreated from his place in the galley and dropped into the boat, which we then brought round to the ship's counter to be handier for Captain Smollett. "Now, men," said he, "do you hear me?" Well, there's no answer for the forecastle. "It is to you, Abraham Gray. It is to you I am speaking." Still no reply. "Gray," resumed Mr. Smollett a little louder, "I'm leaving this ship, and I order you to follow your captain. I know you are a good man at bottom, and I dare say not one of the lot of you is as bad as he makes out. I have my watch here in my hand, and I give you 30 seconds to join me in." Now there's a pause. "Come, my fine fellow," continued the captain, "don't hang so long in the straits. I'm risking my life and the lives of these good gentlemen every second." There was a sudden scuffle, a sound of blows, and out burst Abraham Gray with a knife cut on the side of his cheek. Oh, he came running the captain like a dog to the whistle. "I'm with you, sir," said he. And at the next moment, he and the captain had dropped aboard us, and we had shoved off and given away. Why would you leave the ship to people that you don't trust? We were clear out of the ship, but we're not yet ashore in our stockade. Well, anyway, next chapter, narrative continued by the doctor, the jolly boat's last trip. Oh, this 5th trip was quite different from any of the others. In the first place, the little galley pot of a boat that we were in was gravely overloaded. 5 grown men, and 3 of them, Trelawney, Redruth, and the captain, over 6 feet high. Yeah, it was already more than we was meant to carry. Add to that powder, pork, bread bags, and the gunwale was lipping astern. Several times we shipped a little water into my breeches, and the tails of my coat were all soaking wet before we had gone 100 yards. The captain made us trim the boat, and we had got her to lie a good more evenly. All the same, we were afraid to breathe. And in the second place, the ebb was now making a strong rippling current running westward through the basin and then southward and seaward down the straits by which we had entered in the morning. Even the ripples were a danger to our overloaded craft. But the worst of it was that we were swept out of our true course and away from our proper landing place behind the point. Oh, if we let the current have its way, we should come ashore beside the gigs, where the pirates might appear at any moment. Now, I cannot keep her ahead for the stockade, sir, said I to the captain. I was steering, while Redruth and 2 fresh men were at the oars. Oh, the tide keeps washing her down. Could you pull a little stronger? No, not without swamping the boat, said he. You must bear up, sir, if you please. Bear up until you see you're gaining. Well, I tried and found by experiment that the tide kept sweeping us westward until I had laid her head due east, or just about right angles to the way we ought to go. We'll never get ashore at this rate, said I. Oh, it's only the course that we can lie, sir. We must even lie it, returned the captain. We must keep upstream. You see, sir, he went on, if once we dropped to leeward of the landing place, it's hard to say where we should get ashore. Besides the chance of being boarded by the gigs, whereas the way we go to the current must slacken, and then we can dodge back along the shore. The currents are less already, sir, said the man Gray, who was sitting in the foresheets. You could ease her off a bit. Well, thank you, my man, said I, quite as if nothing had happened, for we had all quietly made up our minds to treat him like one of ourselves. Suddenly, the captain spoke up again, and I thought his voice was a little changed. The gun, he said. I've thought about that, said I, for I made sure he was thinking of a bombardment of the fort. Oh, they could never get the gun ashore, and if they did, they could never haul it through the woods. Look astern, Doctor, replied the captain. We had entirely forgotten the long 9, and there, to our horror, were the 5 rogues busy about her, getting her off jacket, as they called the stout tarpaulin cover under which she sailed. Oh, I love that he explains that, but everything else like gig and stuff, we're just not going to learn about that. I guess kids back when this was written just knew everything about boats, as they called the stout tarpaulin. Okay, not only that, but it flashed into my mind at that same moment that the round shot and the powder for the gun had all been left behind, and a stroke with an axe would put it all into the possession of the evil ones abroad. Israel was Flint's gunner, said Gray hoarsely. At any risk, we put the boat's head direct for the landing place, and by this time we had gotten so far out of the run of the current that we kept steerage way even at our necessary gentle rate of rowing, and I could keep her steady for a goal. But the worst of it was that with the course I now held, we turned our broadside instead of our stern to the Hispaniola, and offered a target like a barn door. I could hear as well as see that brandy-faced rascal Israel Hands plumping down a round shot on the deck. Who's the best shot? Asked the captain. Mr. Trelawney, out and away, said I. Mr. Trelawney, will you please pick me off one of these men, sir? Hands, if possible, said the captain. Trelawney was as cool as steel. Oh, he looked at the priming of his gun. Now, cried the captain, easy with that gun, sir, or you'll swamp the boat. All hands stand by to trim her when he aims. The squire raised his gun, and the rowing ceased, and we leaned over to the other side to keep the balance, so it was also nicely contrived that he did not ship a drop. They had the gun, by this time, slewed round upon the swivel. The Hands, who was at the muzzle with the hammer, the rammer, was at a consequence the most exposed. However, we had no luck, and just as Trelawney fired, down he stooped. The ball whistled over him. I was one of the 4 other who fell. The cry he gave was echoed not only by his companions on board, but by a great number of voices from the shore. And looking in that direction, I saw other pirates trooping out from amongst the trees and tumbling into their places in the boats. Here comes the gig, sir, said I. Give way, then, cried the captain. We mustn't mind if we swamp her now. If we can get ashore, all's up. Well, only one of the gigs is being manned, sir, I added. The crew of the other most likely going round by shore to cut us off. Well, they'll have a hot run, sir, cried the captain. Jack ashore, you know. It's not them, I mind. It's the round shot. Carpet bowls, my lady's maid couldn't miss. Tell us, squire, when you see the match, it will hold water. In the meanwhile, we had been making headway at good pace for a boat so overloaded we had shipped out for a little water in the process, but we are now close in 30 or 40 strokes until we should beach her, for the ebb had already disclosed a narrow belt of sand below the clustering trees. The gig was no longer to be feared, and the little point had already concealed it from our eyes. The ebb tide, which had so cruelly delayed us, was now making reparation and delaying our assailants. The one source of danger was the gun. If I durst, said the captain, I'd drop and pick off another man. Oh, but it was plain that they meant nothing should they delay their shot. They had never so much as looked at their fallen comrade, though he was not dead. And I could see him trying to crawl away. Ready, cried the squire. Hold, cried the captain, quick as an echo. And he and Redruth backed with a great heave that sent her stern bodily under water. The report fell in the same instant of time, and there was at first that Jim heard the sound of the squire's shot not having reached him, where the ball passed, and not one of us precisely knew, but I fancy it must have been over our heads, and that the wind of it may have contributed to our disaster. At any rate, the boat sank by the stern, quite gently, in the 3 feet of water, leaving the captain and myself facing each other on our feet, and the other 3 took complete headers and came up again drenched and bubbling. Well, so far there was no great harm, huh? No lives lost. Yeah, we could wade ashore in safety, but there are all stores at the bottom, and we could make things worse. Only 2 guns out of 5 remained in the state for service. Mine I had snatched from my knees and held over my head by a sort of, instinct. And as for the captain, he had carried over his shoulder by a bandolier, and like a wise man, lock uppermost. The other 3 had gone down with the boat. To add to our concern, we heard voices already drawing near us in the woods along the shore. And we had not only the danger of being cut off from the stockade in our half-crippled state, but by the fear before us whether, if Hunter and Joyce were attacked by half a dozen, they would have the sense and the conduct stand firm. Hunter was steady. That we knew. Joyce... It was a doubtful case. A pleasant, polite man for a valet and to brush one's clothes, but not entirely fitted for a man of war. And with all this in our minds, we waded ashore as fast as we could, leaving behind us the poor jolly boat and a good half of all of our powder and provisions. Next chapter. Narrative continued by the doctor. The end of the first day's fighting. Why do they keep declaring who's the narration? All right. We made our best speed across the strip of wood that now divided us from the stockade, and at every step we took the voices of the buccaneers ranging nearer. Soon we could hear their footfalls as they ran in the cracking of the branches as they breasted across the bit of thicket. I began to see we should have a brush for it in earnest, and looked at my priming. Captain, said I, Trelawney is the dead shot. Give him your gun. His own is useless. Now they exchanged guns, and Trelawney, silent and cool as he had been since the beginning of the bustle, hung a moment on his heel to see that all was fit for service. And at that same time, observing Gray to be unarmed, I handed him my cutlass. It did our hearts good to see him spit in his hand, knit his brows, and make the blade sing through the air. What? He's just like swooping this sword through the air like a child does? It was plain from the very line of his body that our new hand was worth his salt. 40 paces farther, we came to the edge of the wood and saw the stockade in front of us. Well, we struck the enclosure about the middle of the south side, and almost at the same time, 7 mutineers, Job Anderson, the boatswain, and at their head, appeared in full cry at the southwestern corner. They paused, as if taken aback, and before they recovered, not only the squire and I, but Hunter and Joyce from the blockhouse had time to fire. 4 shots came in rather a scattering volley, but they did the business. One of the enemy actually fell, and the rest, without hesitation, turned and plunged into the trees. After reloading, we walked down the outside of the palisade to see the fallen enemy. He was stone dead, shot through the heart. We began to rejoice over our good success, and then we sat at that moment. A pistol cracked in the brush, a ball whistled close past my ear, and poor Tom Redruth stumbled and fell his length on the ground. Both the squire and I returned the shot, but as we had nothing to aim at, it's probably only wasted powder. Then we reloaded and turned our attention to poor Tom. The captain and Gray were already examining him, and I saw with half an eye that all was over. I believe the readiness of our return volley had scattered the mutineers once more, for we had suffered without further molestation to get the poor old gamekeeper hoisted over the stockade and carried, groaning and bleeding, into the log-house. Poor old fellow, he had not uttered one word of surprise, complaint, fear, or even acquiescence from the very beginning of all of our troubles till now. When we had laid him down in the log-house to die, he had lain like a Trojan behind the mattress in the gallery. He had followed every order, silently, doggedly, and well. He was the oldest of our party by a score of years, and now, sullen, old, serviceable servant, it was he that was to die. The squire dropped down beside him on his knees and kissed his hand, crying like a child. "Be I going, doctor?" he asked. "Tom, my man," said I, "you're going home." "I wish I had a lick at them with the gun first," he replied. "Tom," said the squire, "say you forgive me, won't you?" "Would that be respectful like for me to you, squire?" was the answer. "Howsoever, so be it, amen." After a little while of silence, he had thought somebody might read a prayer. "It's custom, sir," he added apologetically, and not long after, without another word, he passed away. In the meantime, the captain, whom I observed to be wonderfully swollen about the chest and pockets, had turned out a great many various stores. The British colors, a Bible, a coil of stoutish rope, pen, ink, the logbook, and pounds of tobacco. He had found a longish fir tree lying felled and trimmed in the enclosure, and with the help of Hunter, he had set it up at the corner of the log house where the trunks crossed and made an angle. Then, climbing on the roof, he had with his own hand bent and run up the colors. Well, this seemed mightily to relieve him. He re-entered the log house and set about counting up the stores as if nothing else existed, but he had an eye on Tom's passage for all that, and as soon as all was over, he came forward with another flag and reverently spread it on the body. "Well, don't you take odds, sirs," he said, shaking the squire's hand. "All's well with him, no fear for a hand that's been shot down, and the duty to captain and owner. It mayn't be good divinity, but it's a fact." Then he pulled me aside. "Dr. Livesey," he said, and how many weeks do you and Squire expect to consort?" Well, I told him it was a question of not weeks, but months, and that if we were not back by the end of August, Blandley was to send for us, but neither sooner nor later. "You can calculate for yourself," I said. "Why, yes," returned the captain, scratching his head, "and making a large allowance, sir, for all the gifts of Providence, I should say that we are pretty close hauled." "How do you mean?" I asked. "That's pretty, sir. We lost the second load." "That's what I mean," replied the captain. "As for powder and shot, we'll do. But rations are short, very short. So short, Dr. Livesey, that we're perhaps as well without an extra mouth." And he pointed to the dead body under the flag. Just then, the roar and a whistle, a round shot passed high above the roof of the log house and plumped far beyond us in the wood. "Oh ho!" cried the captain. "Blaze away, you little enough powder already, my lads." At the second trial, well, the aim was better. The ball descended inside the stockade, scattering a cloud of sand, but doing no further damage. "Captain," said the squire, "the house is quite invisible from the ship. It must be the flag that they're aiming at. Would it not be wiser to take it in?" "Strike my colors," said the captain. "No, sir, not I." And as soon as we had said the words, I think we all agreed with him, for it was not only a piece of stout, seemingly good feeling, it was good policy besides. It showed our enemies that we despise their cannonade. All through the evening, I'm just thinking right now as I'm reading this, a man dies in your service, and he seems kind of in a good mood about it. Like, no, this is fine. I'm dying for you. And that's got to be pretty good, right? And then you could say, if you become a ghost, can you use your invisible body to go out and fuck around with all the pirates? Like, throw their guns in the water, or I don't know, ghost poop on their food or something. You could almost have an invisible person working for you. Get the ghost to do it. I don't know. I'm just moving on. All through the evening, they kept thundering away. Ball after ball flew over or fell short and kicked up the sand in the enclosure, but they had no fire so high that the shot fell dead and buried itself in the soft sand. Well, we had no ricochet to fear, though one popped in through the roof of the log house and out again through the floor as soon as we used that sort of horseplay and minded it no more than cricket. This is one good thing about all this, observed the captain. The wood in front of us is likely clear. The ebb has made a good while. Our stores should be uncovered. Volunteers to go and bring in pork. Gray and Hunter were the first to come forward, well armed, and they stole out of the stockade, but it proved a useless mission. The mutineers were bolder than we fancied, or they put more trust in Israel's gunnery. 4 or 5 of them were busy carrying off our stores, waiting out with them one of the gigs that lay close by. Pulling an oar or so to hold her steady against the current. Silver was in the stern sheets in command, and every man of them now provided with a musket from some secret magazine of their own. That's when you could use a ghost. The captain sat down in his log, and here is the beginning of the entry. Alexander Smollett, master, David Livesey, ship's doctor, Abraham Gray, carpenter's mate, John Trelawney, owner, John Hunter and Richard Joyce, owner's servants, landsmen, being all that is left faithful of the ship's company. With stores for 10 days at short rations, came ashore this day and flew British colors on the log house in Treasure Island. Thomas Redruth, owner's servant, landsman, shot by the mutineers, and also, perhaps, ghost spy. James Hawkins, cabin boy, and at the same time I was wondering over poor Jim Hawkins' fate. A hail on the land side. Somebody's hailing us, said the hunter, who was on the guard. Doctor, Squire, Captain, hello, Hunter, is that you? Came the cries. And I ran to the door in time to see Jim Hawkins. Oh, he's safe and sound, climbing over the stockade. Well, that seems like a really nice relief and a great time for us to take a break. And, I don't know, get out of here, go down to the basement where I can tell you about the latest upcoming books from Penguin Random House. Stop acting weird. It's not weird. Going to my basement is totally normal and not creepy. I'll see you down there. And if I don't see you down there and I see you in that pool, I swear to God, oh, there you are. You did come down to the basement. God bless you. Why don't you take a seat over there in that one folding chair underneath that naked light bulb as I stand here under this naked light bulb and play my guitar for you. Yeah, a little bit of a flourish. As I let you know about the latest upcoming Random House book called The Call to Serve, The Life of an American President, George Herbert Walker Bush, a visual biography by John Meacham. You want to learn about it? Sure. About the call to serve? In honor of the 100th anniversary of George H.W. Bush's birth, he's dead now, in this visually stunning chronicle, it's a visual book, features never-before-published photos, goody, and memories celebrating the 41st president's vision of leadership as service to country. Curated by Pulitzer Prize-winning biographer John Meacham. Lavishly illustrated. Call to Serve is an intimate, illuminating portrait of the 41st president, a man who is so much more than just his politics, in words and images, many found in a lifetime of scrapbooks kept by Barbara Pierce Bush. John Meacham brings George H.W. Bush vividly to life. Oh, thank God, he's finally being brought vividly to life from the values of integrity, empathy, and grace that Bush learned in childhood to his leadership at the highest levels at tumultuous times. The 41st president embodied an ideal of service that warrants attention in our own divided time. Bush perused the life of service to America through his heroic combat experience in the Pacific during World War II, his political rise in Texas, his serving as the U.S. ambassador in the UN, and his time as an envoy to China as director of the CIA. His tenure as Ronald Reagan's vice president. Reagan's? I said Reagan. Whatever. And his election as the 41st president of the United States. Set against the background of America during the 20th and 21st centuries, this book commemorates the legacy of a man who was far from perfect. You could say that. He could be cutthroat on the campaign trail, but all whose ambition was not an end to itself. Bush's drive was to succeed. It was rather a means to put the values of balance, patriotism, and respect for others into action in the political arena. You're simplifying it. Toward the end of Bush's life, the 44th president, Barack Obama, said that Bush put the country first, both before he was president and while he was president, ever since. Featuring more than 450 photographs. Oh, that sounds delicious. Meacham's introduction and commentary throughout, and narration drawn from his biography of George H.W. Bush, Destiny and Power. This is an essential tribute to a uniquely American life. So that's The Call to Serve, A Life of American President George Herbert Walker Bush, a visual biography by John Meacham, category Political Figure Biographies and Memoirs, U.S. History and Photography. Hardcover, $45. Oh my God. If anyone is old enough to know who he is, just imagine his face. Now imagine a book for $45. Just nothing but his face. Him shaking hands with someone, him shaking hands with somebody else, him most likely just a lot of shots of him playing golf. I'm not trying to downplay what he did in World War II. I'm sure he did like scary, horrible, like things that are terrifying that I would never want to do. But after that, he wasn't a very exciting guy. Hardcover for $45 from Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, Bookshop.org, Hudson Booksellers, Powell's, Target, and hey, I imagine the kind of people that would want to buy this book are the kind of people that wear sweatpants in public. Not like in the cool teenager way, but like the classic sweatpants you can get from Target, where you just like they have their cinched off at the ankles and they're like super cheap and they wind up like falling apart after 3 months. Those kind of people walking around with looking for, where's the cheese balls? I'm looking for the giant thing of cheese balls. When you guys are out of cheese balls, how are you ever out of cheese balls? Oh, Herbert Walker Bush, and then they grab that book at Walmart. Well, with that, why don't we go back upstairs to the library and continue reading this book? Yeah, all right. Hurry up and sit down. It turns out I gotta pee, so I'm gonna see how fast I can get through this chapter, and then I'm gonna go take a pee break. So just sit the hell down. Narrative resumed by Jim Hawkins. Oh, we've changed narrators now. The garrison in the stockade. As soon as Ben Gunn, oh God, it's that guy, the Tom Hanks of this story. As soon as Ben Gunn saw the colors, he came to a halt, stopped me by the arm, and sat down. Now, said he, there's your friend, sure enough. Far more likely it's the mutineers, I answered. That, he cried, why, in a place like this, where nobody puts in but gentlemen of fortune, silver would fly the Jolly Roger, and you'll make no doubt about that. No, that's your friends. There's been blows, too, I reckon, and your friends have had the best of it, and there they are ashore off the old stockade, as was made years ago by Flint. Ah... He was the man to have a headpiece, was Flint, bearing rum, match were never seen, and were afraid of none. Not he, only Silver. Silver was that genteel. Well, said I, that may be so, and so be it. All the more reason that I should hurry on and join my friends. Nay, mate, returned Ben, not you. You're a good boy, and I mistook, but yeah, you're only a boy, all told. Now, Ben Gunn is fly. Ooh, I wish he was saying fly like we say fly now. Rum wouldn't bring me there. Where you're going, not rum wouldn't. Not till I see you're born gentleman, and he gets it on his word of honor, and then you won't forget my words. A precious sight, that's what you'll say. A precious sight more confidence. And then nips him. And he pinched me the third time with the same air of cleverness. And when Ben Gunn is wanted, oh, you know where to find him, Jim. Just where you found him today, and him that comes to have a white flag on his hand, and he comes alone. Oh, and you'll say this, Ben Gunn, says you, has reasons of his own. Well, said I believe I understand. You have something to propose, and you wish to see the squire or the doctor. Or you found it where I found you, is that all? And when, says you, he added, why, from the noon observation of about 6 bells. Good, said I. And now may I go? Won't you forget, he inquired anxiously, precious sight, and the reasons of his own, says you. Reasons of his own, that's the mainstay, as a man between a man. Well then, still holding me, I reckon you can go, Jim. And Jim, if you was to see silver, you wouldn't go for to sell Ben Gunn, eh? Wild horses couldn't draw it from you. No, says you. And if them pirates camp ashore, Jim, what would you say? But where'd be the winners in the morning? Don't know what that means. Not looking it up. Here he was interrupted by a loud report, and a cannonball came tearing through the trees and pitched in the sand not 100 yards from where the two were talking. The next moment, each of us had taken to the heels in a different direction. Well, for a good hour to come, frequent reports shook the island. The balls kept crashing through the woods. I moved from hiding place to hiding place, always pursued, or so it seemed to me, by these terrifying missiles. But toward the end of the bombardment, though still I durst not venture in the direction of the stockade, where the balls fell oftenest, I had begun, in a manner, to pluck up my heart again, and after a long detour to the east, crept down among the shore-side trees. The sun had just set. The sea breeze was rustling and tumbling in the woods and ruffling the gray surface on the anchorage. The tide, too, was far out, and great tracts of sand lay uncovered. The air, after the heat of the day, chilled me through my jacket. The Hispaniola still lay there where she anchored, but sure enough, there was the Jolly Roger, the black flag of piracy. Flying from her peak, even as I looked, there came another red flash, another report that sent echoes clattering, and one more round shot whistled through the air, and it was the last of the cannonade. I lay for some time watching the bustle which succeeded the attack. The men were demolishing something with axes on the beach near the stockade. The poor jolly boat, I afterwards discovered, away near the mouth of the river, a great fire was glowing amongst the trees. And between that point and the ship, and one of the gigs kept coming and going, and men whom I had seen so gloomy shouting at the oars like children, but there was the sound of their voices which suggested rum. At length, I thought I might return toward the stockade. I was pretty far down the low, sandy pit that encloses the anchorage to the east, and it was joined by a half-water to Skeleton Island. And now, as I rose to my feet, I saw some distance further down the pit, and rising from among the low bushes, an isolated rock, pretty high, particularly white in color. It occurred to me that this might be the white rock of which Ben Gunn had spoken, and that some day or another a boat might be wanted and I should know where to look for one. Then I skirted among the woods until I regained the rear or shoreward side of the stockade, and was soon warmly welcomed by the faithful party. I had soon told my story and begun to look about me. Oh, the log house was made of unsquared trunks of pine. Ugh. Roof, walls, and floor. The ladder stood in several places as much as a foot or a foot and a half above the surface of the sand, and there was a porch at the door, and under this porch a little spring welled up into an artificial basin of rather odd kind. No other than a great ship's kettle of iron, with the bottom knocked out and sunk, quote, to her bearings, as the captain said among the sand. Little had been left besides the framework of the house, but in one corner there was a stone slab laid down by way of hearth, and an old rusty iron basket to contain the fire. The slopes of the knoll and all inside the stockade had been cleared of timber to build a house, and we could see by the stumps what a fine and lofty grove had been destroyed. Most of the soil had been washed away or buried in drift after the removal of the trees, only where the streamlet ran down from the kettle to a thick bed of moss and some ferns and a little creeping bushes were still green among the sand. Very close around the stockade, too close for deference, they said, the wood still flourished, high and dense, all of fir on the land side, but toward the sea with a large admixture of live oaks. The cold evening breeze, which I have spoken, whistled through every chink of the rude building and sprinkled the floor with a continual rain of fine sand. And there was the sand in our eyes, and the sand in our teeth, and the sand in our suppers, Sand dancing in the spring at the bottom of the kettle, and all the world like porridge beginning to boil. What the hell is going on right now? Our chimney was a square hole in the roof, but a little part of the smoke that found its way out, and the rest eddied about the house. It kept us coughing and piping the eye. What does piping the eye mean? I'm not going to look it up. Add to this that gray, the new man. He had his face tied up in a bandage for a cut that he had got for breaking away from the mutineers, and that poor old Tom Redruth, still unburied, gross, lay along the wall, gross, stiff and stark, gross, under the Union Jack. Now, if he'd been allowed aside to sit idle, we'd have all fallen in the blues, but Captain Smollett was never a man for that. All hands were called up before him, and he divided us into watches. The doctor and Gray and I for one, the squire, Hunter, and Joyce on the other. Tired though we all were, 2 were sent out for the firewood. 2 more were set to dig a grave for Redruth. Well, that's nice, finally go about doing that. The doctor was named Cook, and I put sentry at the door. The captain himself went from one to another, keeping up our spirits and lending a hand wherever it was wanted. For time to time, the doctor came in the door for a little air and to rest his eyes, which were almost smoked out of his head, and whenever he did so, he had a word for me. "That man Smollett," he said once, "is better man than I am. And when I say that, it means a deal, Jim." Another time he came, he was silent for a while, then he put his head on one side, then he looked at me. "Has this Ben Gunn a man?" he asked. "I do not know, sir," said I. "I'm not sure whether he's sane." "Is there any doubt about the matter? He is," returned the doctor. "A man who has been 3 years biting his nails on a desert island. Jim can't expect to appear as sane as you or me. It doesn't lie in human nature. Was it cheese you said he had a fancy for?" "Yeah, cheese, sir," I answered. "Well, Jim," said he, "let's see the good that comes from being dainty in your food. You've seen my snuff box, haven't you? And you never saw me take a snuff. Yeah, the reason for that, my snuff box, I carry a piece of Parmesan cheese." A cheese made in Italy. Very nutritious. Well, that's for Ben Gunn. I love that. I love that he's like, "I'm going to get on this boat here in this major city that I am currently occupying, but I don't trust these people on this boat. I'm going to take this snuff box. I'm going to clear it out and put a single chunk of cheese. And I'm not going to let anyone know my terrible secret." Well, now it's coming to fruition. Before supper was eaten, we buried old Tom in the sand and stood round him for a while, bareheaded in the breeze. A good deal of firewood had been got in, and, well, not enough for the captain's fancy, but he shook his head over it and told us, we must get back to this tomorrow rather livelier. Then, when we had gotten eaten of our pork, and each of us had a good stiff glass of brandy grog, and the 3 chiefs got together to quarter and discuss our prospects. It appears they were at their wits' end on what to do, the stores being so low that we must have been starved into surrender long before help came, but our best hope, it was decided, was to kill off the buccaneers until either they hauled down their flag or ran away with the Hispaniola. From 19, they were already reduced to 15. 2 others were wounded. One, at least, a man, shot beside the gun, severely wounded, if he were not dead. And every time we had a crack at them, we were to take it, saving our own lives, with the extremest care. And besides that, we had 2 able allies, rum and climate. As for the first, well, though we were half a mile away, we could hear them roaring and singing late into the night. As for the second, the doctor staked his wig. Again with that, I'll bet my wig. Camped where they were in the marsh and unprovided the remedies that half of them would be on their backs before a week. So, he added, if we're not all shot down first, they'll be glad to be packing up in the schooner. It's always a ship, and they can get into buccaneering again, I suppose. First ship I ever lost, said Captain Smollett. I was dead tired, as you may fancy, and when I got to sleep, which was not until after a great deal of tossing, I slept like a log of wood. The rest had been, long been up and already breakfast. Oh, I never heard that said before. Have you been breakfast? That's kind of a fun way of saying that, and increased the pile of firewood by about a half as much again as I was wakened by a bustle from the sound of voices. Flag of truce, I heard someone say, and then immediately after a cry of surprise, Silver himself. And at that, up I jumped, and rubbing my eyes, I ran to a loophole in the wall. Oh good, it's the next chapter. I'm going to go take a piss. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm coming back. Here I am. I'm back. All right, I'm back. Next chapter, Silver's Embassy. Sure enough, well, there were two men just outside the stockade, one of them waving a white cloth, and the other no less a person than Silver himself, Burp standing placidly by. Well, it was still quite early, the coldest morning that I think I was ever abroad in. A chill that pierced into the marrow. The sky was bright and cloudless overhead, and the tops of the trees shone rosily in the sun. But where Silver stood, with his lieutenant, all was still in shadow. They waded knee-deep in a low white vapor that had crawled during the night out of the morass. The chill and the vapor taken together told a poor tale of the island. It was plainly a damp, feverish, unhealthy spot. Keep indoors, men, said the captain. 10 to 1, this is a trick. Then he hailed the buccaneer. Oh, my frickin' Kindle turn off. I peed for too long. Then he hailed the buccaneer. Who goes? Stand or we fire. Flag of truce, cried Silver. Now the captain's on the porch, keeping himself carefully out of the way of a treacherous shot, which should any be intended. He turned and spoke to us. Doctor, watch on the lookout. Dr. Livesey, take the north side. If you please, Jim, the east. Gray, west. The watch below, all hands to load muskets. Lively, men, and be careful. And then he turned again to the mutineers. And what do you want of your flag of truce? He cried. This time it was the other man who replied, Captain Silver, sir, to come aboard and make terms, he shouted. Captain Silver? Don't know him. Who's he? Cried the captain. Oh, what a little fussy baby. And then we could hear him adding to himself, Captain, is it? My heart. Here's the promotion. Well, Long John answered for himself. Me, sir, these poor lads have chosen me captain after your desertion, sir, laying a particular emphasis upon the word desertion. We're willing to submit if we can come to terms, and no bones about it. All I ask is your word, Captain Smollett, to let me safe and sound out of this here stockade, and 1 minute to get out a shot before a gun is fired. My man, said Captain Smollett, I have not the slightest desire to talk to you, and if you wish to talk to me, you can come, that's all. If there's any treachery, it'll be on your side, and the Lord help you. Yeah, that's enough, Captain, shouted Long John cheerily. A word from you is enough. I know a gentleman, and you may lay to that. We could see the men who carry the flag of truce attempting to hold Silver back, nor was that wonderful seeing how cavalier he had been in the captain's answer, but Silver laughed at him aloud, and slapped him on the back, slap, if the idea of alarm had been absurd. Then he advanced to the stockade, threw over his crutch, got a leg up, and with a great vigor and skill succeeded in surmounting the fence and dropping safely to the other side. I will confess that I was far too much taken up with what was going on to be the slightest use of sentry. Indeed, I had already deserted my eastern loophole and crept up beside the captain, who had now seated himself on the threshold, with his elbows on his knees and his head in his hands, and his eyes fixed on the water as it bubbled out from the old iron kettle in the sand. He was whistling, "Come, lasses and lads." Silver had terrible hard work getting up the knoll, what with the steepness of the incline and the thick tree stumps and the soft sand. He and his crutch were as helpless as a ship in stays, but he stuck to it like a man in silence and at last arrived before the captain, whom he saluted in the most handsome style. And he was tricked out at his best in a man's blue coat, thick with brass buttons, hung low to his knees, and a fine laced hat was set back on his head. "Here you are, my man," said the captain, raising his head. "You'd better sit down." "You ain't gonna let me inside, Captain?" complained Long John. "It's a man's cold morning, to be sure, to sit outside upon the sand." "Why, Silver," said the captain, "if you had pleased to be an honest man, you might be sitting in your galley. It's your own doing. You're either my ship's cook, and then you were treated handsome, or Captain Silver, a common mutineer and a pirate, and then you can go hang." Well, Captain," returned the sea cook, sitting down as he was bidden on the sand. "You'll have to give me a hand up again, that's all. A sweet, pretty place you have here. Ah, there's Jim." "The top of the morning to you, Jim. Doctor, here's my service. Why, they're all you are together, like a happy family in a manner of speaking." "If you have anything to say, my man, you better say it," said the captain. "Right you were, Captain Smalley," replied Silver. "Duty, with 2 O's, is duty, to be sure. Shit is shit. Well, now, you look here. That was a good lay of yours last night." "I don't deny it. It's a good lay. Some of you pretty handy with a hand spike's end, and I'll not deny either. But what some of my people was shook. Maybe all was shook. Maybe I was shook myself. Maybe that's why I was here for terms. But you mark me, Captain, it won't do twice. By thunder. We'll have to do a sentry go and ease off a point or so in the rum. Maybe you think we were all a sheet in the wind's eye. But I'll tell you I was sober. I was only dog-tired, and if I'd awoke a second sooner, I'd have caught you in the act, I would. He wasn't dead when I got around to him, not he." "Well," said the captain, small as cool as could be, "all that Silver said was to riddle him, and you could never have guessed it from his tone. As for me, I began an inkling. Ben Gunn's last words came back to my mind. I began to suppose that he had paid buccaneers a visit while they all lay drunk together around the fire, and I reckoned with glee that he had only 14 enemies to deal with." "Well, here it is," said Silver. "We want that treasure. We'll have it. That's our point. You would just as soon save your lives, I reckon, and that's yours. You have a chart, haven't you?" "That may be," replied the captain. Well, you have." "I know that," returned Long John. "You need so husky with a man. There ain't a particle of service in that, and you may lay into it. What I mean is, we want your chart, and now I never meant you no harm myself." "That won't do with me, my man," interrupted the captain. "Well, we know exactly what you meant to do, and we don't care. For now, you see, you can't do it." And the captain looked at him calmly and proceeded to fill a pipe. "If Abe Gray," Silver spoke out. "Avast there," said Mr. Smollett. "Gray told me nothing, and I asked him nothing. And what's more, I could see you and him and this whole island blown clean out of the water to places first. So here's my mind for you, my man, on that." This little whiff of temper seemed to cool Silver down. He had been growing nettled before, but now he pulled himself together. "Like enough," he said. "I'd like to set no limits to what gentlemen might consider shipshape, or might not, as the case were. And seeing as how you are about to take a pipe, Captain, I'll make so free as I do likewise." And he filled a pipe and lighted it, and the two men sat, silently smoking for quite a while, now looking at each other in the face, now stopping their tobacco, and now leaning forward to spit. It was as good as a play to see them. "Now," resumed Silver, "here it is. You give us the chart, we get the treasure by, and drop shooting poor seamen and stoving off their heads while they sleep. You do that, and we'll offer you a choice. Either you come aboard along of us, once the treasure is shipped, and then I'll give you my affidavy, upon my word of honor, to clap you somewhere safe ashore. Or if that ain't your fancy, some of my hands being rough and having old sores on account of hazing, then you can stay here. You can. We'll divide the stores with you, man for man, and I'll give my affidavy as before we speak to the first ship I sight and send them here to pick you up. Now you'll own that talking. Handsomer you couldn't look to get, now you, and I hope, raising his voice, that all hands on this here blockhouse will overhaul my words. For that what is spoke to one is spoke to all. Captain Smollett rose from his seat and knocked out the ashes of his pipe with the palm of his hand. Is that all? He asked. Well, every last word by thunder, answered John. Refuse that, and you've seen the last of me but musket balls. Very good, said the captain. Now you'll hear me. If you'll come up one by one, unarmed, I'll engage to clap you all in irons and take you home to a fair trial in England. Then 7 people highlighted this in my Kindle. If you won't, my name is Alexander Smollett, and I have flown my sovereign's colors, and I'll see you all to Davy Jones. You can't find the treasure. And apparently that was highlighted. Why? That wasn't that great. That was a really dumb line to highlight. All right, fine. Apparently it's important to other people. You can't sail the ship. Oh, there's not a man among you fit to sail the ship. You can't fight us, Gray. There, got away from 5 of you. Your ship's in irons, Master Silver. You're on a lee shore, as you'll find, and I stand here to tell you so. And they're the last good words you'll get from me. And in the name of heaven, I'll put a bullet in your back when I next meet you. Tramp, my lad, bundle out of this, please, hand over hand, and double quick. Well, Silver's face was a picture. His eyes started in his head with wrath, and he shook the fire out of his pipe. Now, give me a hand up, he cried. Not I, returned the captain. Who'll give me a hand up? He roared. Not a man among us moved. Growling the foulest imprecations, he crawled along the sand till he got a hold of the porch, and he could hoist himself up again on his crutch, and then he spat into the spring. There, he cried, that's what I think of ye. Before an hour's out, I'll stove on your old blockhouse like a rum puncheon. Laugh, by thunder, laugh. Before the hour's out, you'll laugh on the other side. Them that'll die be the lucky ones. And with a dreadful oath, he stumbled off, plowed down through the sand, and helped across the stockade after 4 or 5 failures by the man with the flag of truce, and disappeared in an instant afterwards among the trees. Oh, thank God it's the last chapter of the night. The attack. As soon as Silver disappeared, the captain, who had been closely watching him, turned toward the interior of the house and found not a man of us at his post, but Gray. It was the first time we'd ever seen him angry. Quarters, he roared. And then, as we all slunk back to our places, Gray, he said, I'll put your name in the log. You've stood by your duty like a seaman. Mr. Trelawney, I'm surprised at you, sir, doctor. I thought you had worn in your king's coat. And it was how you served at Fauntleroy, sir. You'd have been better in your berth. Well, the doctor's watch were all black in their loopholes, and the rest were busy loading the spare muskets, and everyone with the red face, you may be certain, and flea in his ear, as saying is. The captain looked on for a while in silence, and then he spoke. My lads, said he, I've given Silver a broadside. I pitched it in red hot on purpose. Before the hour's out, as he said, we shall be boarded. We're outnumbered, and I needn't tell you that, but we shall fight in shelter. And a minute ago, I should have said that we fought with discipline. I've no manner of doubt that we can drub them if you choose. And then he went around the rounds. He saw, as he said, all was clear. And on the 2 short sides of the house, east and west, there were only 2 loopholes. On the south side, there was a porch, was 2 again. On the north side, 5. And there was a round score of muskets for the 7 of us. The firewood had been built into 4 piles, tables, as you might say. One about middle of each side, and one of these tables is some ammunition. And 4 loaded muskets were laid ready to the hand of the defenders. In the middle, the cutlasses lay ranged. Toss out the fire, said the captain. The chill is past, and we mustn't have smoke in our eyes. The iron fire brisket was carried bodily out by Mr. Trelawney, and the embers smothered among sand. Hawkins hadn't had his breakfast. Hawkins, help yourself, and back to your post to eat it, continued Captain Smollett. Lively now, my lad. You don't want it before you're done. Hunter, serve out a round of brandy to all hands. And while this was going on, the captain completed, in his own mind, the plan of defense. Doctor, you will take the door, he resumed. See, and don't expose yourself. Keep within, and fire through the porch. Hunter, take the east side. There. Joyce, you stand by the west, my man. Mr. Trelawney, oh, you're the best shot. You and Gray will take the north, long north side with the 5 loopholes. It's there that the danger is, and if they can get up to it and fire in upon us from our own ports, things will begin to look dirty. Hawkins, neither you nor I are much account at shooting, so we'll stand by to load and bear a hand. As the captain had said, the chill was past, and soon the sun stockade threw over his crutch. It got a leg at what the heck just happened. And soon the sun, page 129, and then it goes to page 124. What the heck's happening to my Kindle? My Kindle's jumping backwards. 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, the attack. Okay. I just started pressing to go through. I just kept tapping the side, and finally we got there. So anyways, I don't know where I left off because my Kindle decided to have some sort of weird little stroke. Doctor, you take the door. As Captain said, the chill was past, and soon the sun on 129, 130 had climbed up above our girdle of trees. Oh, it fell with all its force upon the clearing and drank up the vapors it was drawing. What basically happened was I clicked the next page and went back to when Silver was climbing the fence with his one leg. And I was like, that's not right. But now we're back on track. Soon the sand was baking and the resin melting in the logs of the blockhouse. Jackets and coats were flung aside, shirts thrown open at the neck. Yes, and rolled up at the shoulders. And soon we stood there, each at his post, in a fever of heat and anxiety. An hour passed away. Hang them, said the captain. This is as dull as the doldrums. Gray, whistle for wind. And just at that moment came the first news of the attack. If you please, sir, said Joyce, if I see anyone, am I to fire? I told you so, said the captain. Thank you, sir, returned Joyce with the same quiet civility. Nothing followed for a time. But the remark had set us all on alert, straining ears and eyes. The musketeers with their pieces balanced on their hands, and the captain out in the middle of the blockhouse with his mouth very tight and a frown on his face. So some seconds passed, till suddenly Joyce whipped up by his musket and fired. Oh, the report had scarcely died away ere it was repeated and repeated from without a scattering volley, shot behind shot, like a string of geese. From every side of the enclosure, several bullets struck the log house, but not one entered, and as the smoke cleared away and vanished the stockade, the woods around it looked as quiet and empty as before. Not a bough waved, that the gleam of a musket barrel betrayed the presence of our foes. Did you hit your man? Asked the captain. No, sir, replied Joyce. I believe not, sir. Next best thing to tell the truth, replied Captain Smollett. Load his gun, Hawkins. Now, how many should say were on your side, Doctor? I know precisely, said Dr. Livesey. 3 shots were fired on this side, and I saw the 3 flashes. 2 close together, 1 further to the west. 3, repeated the captain. And how many on yours, Mr. Trelawney? But this was not so easily answered. There had come many from the north, 7 from by the squire's computation, 8 or 9 according to Gray, from east or west with only a single shot had been fired. Oh, it was plain, therefore, that the attack should be developed for the north, and that of the other 3 sides there was only to be annoyed by a show of hostilities. But Captain Smollett made no change in his arrangements. If the mutineers succeeded in crossing the stockade, he argued, they would take possession of any unprotected loophole and shoot us down like rats at our own stronghold. Nor had we had much time left for us for thought. Suddenly, with a loud huzzah, a little cloud of pirates leaped from the woods on the north side and ran straight at the stockade. And at the same moment, the fire was once more open in the woods. And a rifle ball sang through the doorway and knocked the doctor's musket into bits. The boarders swarmed over the fence like monkeys. Squire and Gray fired again and yet again. 3 men fell, 1 forward in the enclosure, 2 back on the outside. But of these, 1 was evidently more frightened than hurt, for he was on his feet again in a crack and instantly disappeared amongst trees. 2 had bit the dust. One had fled, 4 had made good for their footing on the inside defenses, while the other, the shelter of the woods, had given 7 or 8 men, each evidently supplied with several muskets kept up hot through the useless fire of the log house. The 4 who had boarded made straight before them for the building, shouting as they ran, and the men among the trees shouted back to encourage them. Several shots were fired, but such was a hurry that the marksmen had not one appears to have taken effect. In a moment, the 4 pirates had swarmed up the mound or were upon us. The head of Job Anderson, the boatswain, appeared at the middle loophole. "Adam, all hands," he roared in a voice of thunder. And at that same moment, another pirate grasped Hunter's musket by the muzzle and wrenched it from his hands, plucked it through the loophole, and with one stunning blow laid the poor fellow senseless on the floor. Meanwhile, a third, running unharmed all around the house, appeared suddenly in the doorway and fell with his cutlass on the doctor. Our position was utterly reversed. A moment since we were firing under cover an exposed enemy who we lay uncovered and could not return a blow. The log house was full of smoke, to which we owed our comparative safety. Cries of confusion, flashes, reports of pistol shots, and one loud groan rang in my ears. "Out, lads, out! Fight 'em in the open! Cutlasses!" cried the captain. I snatched the cutlass from the pile, and someone, at the same time snatching another, gave me a cut across the knuckles, which I hardly felt, and I dashed out the door into the clear sunlight. Someone was close behind. I knew not whom. Right in front, the doctor was pursuing the assailant down the hill, and just as my eyes fell upon him, beat down his guard and sent him sprawling on his back with a great slash across the face. "Round the house, lads, round the house," cried the captain. Even in the hurly-burly, I perceived a change in his voice. Mechanically, I obeyed, turned eastwards, and with my cutlass raised, ran round the corner of the house. Next moment, I was face to face with Anderson. He roared aloud, and his hanger went up above his head, flashing in the sunlight, and I had not time to be afraid, but the blow still hung impending. Leapt in a trice upon his side, and missing my foot on the soft sand, rolled headlong down the slope. Oh, so he gets to just get out of killing someone. When I first sallied from the door, the other mutineers had already been swarming up the palisade to make an end for us. One man in a red nightcap, with his cutlass in his mouth, had even got upon the top and thrown his leg across. Well, so short had been the interval that when I found my feet again, all was in the same posture. The fellow with the red nightcap, still halfway over, another still just showing his head above the top of the stockade, and yet, in this breath of time, the fight was over, and the victory was ours. Gray, following close behind me, had cut down the big boatswain ere that he had time to recover from his last blow. Another had been shot at a loophole, and the very act of firing into the house now lay in agony, the pistol still smoking in his hand. And a third, as I had seen, a doctor disposed of a blow. Of the 4 who had scaled the palisade, only one remained unaccounted for, and he, having left his cutlass on the field, was now clambering out again with the fear of death upon him. "Fire! Fire from the house!" cried the doctor, "and you, lads, back into cover!" But his words were unheeded. No shot was fired, and the last boarder made a good escape and disappeared with the rest in the wood. In 3 seconds, nothing remained of the attacking party but the 5 who had fallen, 4 on the inside and 1 on the outside of the palisade. The doctor and Gray and I ran full speed for shelter, and the survivors would soon be back where they had left their muskets, and at any moment the fire may recommence. The house was by this time somewhat cleared of smoke, and we saw at a glance the price that we had paid for victory. Hunter lay beside his loophole, stunned. Joyce by his, shot through the head, never to move again, while right in the center the squire was supporting the captain. One as pale as the other. "The captain's wounded," said Trelawney. Have they run?" asked Mr. Smollett. "Oh, all that could, you may be bound," returned the doctor, "but there's 5 of them that will never run again." "5," cried the captain. "Come, that's better. 5 against 3 leaves us 4-9. Oh, that's better odds than we had at the starting. We were 7-19 then, or so we thought we were, and that's bad to bear." Oh, there's a little a little asterisk. The mutineers were soon only 8 in number, for the man shot by Mr. Trelawney on board the schooner died that same evening of his wound. But this was, of course, not known till after the faithful party. Why give that as a weird little side note? Okay, well, that's it. Next up is part 5 by Sea Adventure. We're not reading that. Why don't we wrap this shit up and go to the smoking room, where perhaps we could have, I don't know, maybe a cigarette, and talk about what the hell we just read. Well, there you go. I see you just got down. Why don't you take a seat? Get yourself all cozy. As you can see, there are now 2 chimp skulls on the table. If you open the top of one skull, there's cigarettes. Oh, my wife's birds. And if you open the other one, what's also in there? It's just more cigarettes. I have so many cigarettes here in the smoking room, all in these chimp or baboon skulls. So what do we learn in these chapters, this long reading of chapters? One, I think it's interesting that action scenes back then were more realistic. It's kind of like No Country for Old Men. Their action scenes were kind of anticlimactic, very quiet, kind of long and drawn out. Kind of the same here, which is kind of refreshing. When they're in their little, house, they're getting shot at by cannon from the ship and everything. And so it's just kind of like boom, one shot. 20 minutes go by, boom, another shot. So people have like a lot of time to think about what's happening versus what we're used to in Hollywood movies, which is like a lot of running around and shooting. It's all dramatic and cool and whatever, like John Wick. And so kind of interesting to see how boring violence can be, I guess. Except towards the end when they're actually attacking the house. Well, then that's everyone's running around shooting at each other. They do a lot of jumping around between narrators, kind of. Most books would just kind of start writing from the point of view of any character in the same chapter, but this author actually calls out who we're learning about on the chapter by each title, which is kind of weird. It's not bad, just a little weird. But like before, this illustrates the difference between the established society of the lawlessness of the pirates, though in this case we feel that there's less reliability in the structures of the world that the captain comes from when he's pitted against these pirates. Oh, they lose most of their food trying to get out on the island and leave their ship wide open to be taken over, which is so silly, because all of a sudden Silver shows up and he gets to kind of do the sort of like, you can't really argue with what I'm saying. Like, you left the ship, so someone's got to be captain, so now I'm captain. You guys get to play that game, that little logic game. It's a lot of fun. But yeah, they just left the ship, which is silly and dumb because whoever controls the ship has the advantage. But nope. They roll like little idiots out into the island and they get stranded. Silver shows up and is charming as hell. Oh, he's friendly and he tries to create a truce where they control the ship but get the map to the treasure and will let the captain and his crew just go to another island and then when we see another ship we'll send them back to you. But at least they'll be safe with like supplies and everything. Here, the lawlessness of the pirates is shown to be more stable and polite than the captain. Where Silver is being considerate and polite, the captain's just kind of being a fussy baby, especially when they meet in person. The conflict may be apparent to Jim as he's feeling kind of conflicted, getting crabby leading up to this, talking about who he hates, and just kind of like, I don't like this guy pisses me off. Just kind of being crabby like he watches a lot of Fox News. Another aspect of the two societies dynamic is what happens to someone who doesn't have the safety of any type of group to rely on, like Ben Hanks. Left to his own devices, he's kind of a babbling mess who's way more reliant on religion to get through his day than most people. He's not totally crazy, but compared to the captain, who comes off from the world as kind of a stiff, rigid hierarchies, and Silver, who comes from a more stripped-down version based on individual survival, Ben is just off the rails. And weirdly, I think Ben's the most interesting, and we don't get a lot of Ben so far in this story. He just kind of talks at Jim a little bit, and then Jim escapes. So we're kind of coming away from each episode of this show with the same message, but what can you do? This is a kid's book. Well, with that, thanks for listening, and I will maybe see you next week. Well, it appears you found me in the part of the podcast I hate the most, where I tell you all about the places on the internet where you can find me. You can tell I hate this because of the sound effects making it sound like a stormy night in the drawing room of the damned. Now, there's that. Are you cool? I like cool people. It's the reason why I got involved in this business to begin with, just to meet cool people, not losers. So if you're cool, feel free to go over to my website, nuzzlehouse.com. But if you go there, you get to hear some of the other stuff that I and my wife work on, like the Radio Mystery Theater show, where we try to recreate the same show that used to be on in the 70s, but they don't make any episodes anymore. So we make our own, and we just steal all their commercials. And also, just in the curious mind, we made a Christmas album. If you go to our link tree, you can see that we made a Christmas album. It's the first thing we did after getting married, which I think everyone should do when they get married, is start talking about the Christmas album they're going to make. And we're working on a new show where we give relationship advice by reading paranormal smut. And since I think you might be cool, you can always just email me directly, glenn.nuzzles@gmail.com. But don't email if you're a nerdlinger or a dork. Now, back to business. I can't believe I drank all of them already. There's got to be one left.